Hey, what's up, everybody?
And welcome back to Mile Higher Podcast, episode 316. I am your host, Kendall.
And I'm your host, Josh.
We are joined by our production team, Janelle and Ian.
Hey.
How's it going?
It's going great.
Really
We're excited.
good.
Yeah, pretty good. We're excited for this episode, right?
Yes, we are.
Because we're talking about time traveling.
Yes, we are. We
I
are
think
talking
that's
about
Everybody's favorite topic. Non-true
really,
crime related.
everybody.
Yeah. Time travel.
Everybody. You've heard it here first.
Because I think every single human on this planet, I believe this, has considered, what if I could time travel? And has wanted to time travel if it was available to them. I think everybody has thought that. Like, there's been a point in everybody's lives where
This is very broad.
they have sat there and they're like, man, if only I could go back in time, or if only I could go into the future
Or
and,
at least-
and know if this was going to happen.
Or at least like having a thought of, I wish I could change the past, or like having a regret or something like
Yes,
that. Or
and-
just have a peep in the future. Maybe not everyone frames it in the view of time travel. Because I don't know if I would want to time travel. It honestly freaks me out.
But that is what it is.
That
It is what it is.
it is.
Time travel.
Well,
Going back into the past, how you get there. You don't just teleport.
that's true. So I guess in a way, like most people probably, think about what it would be like
Thank
to go back
you.
in time.
Thank you for validating
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
my
The episode
hypothesis.
is over. Thank you guys so
Yes.
much.
And there it is. That
And
is-
scene. Well, yes. Today we are diving into the very fascinating story of Mike Marcum and his time travel experience.
Madman.
Oh, yes. My Madman.
Because he's a mad scientist.
Well, if anyone's going to create time travel, it's going to be a madman. Create. I'm incorrect.
Yes. Yes is my response.
But really, this story is so fascinating. Obviously, with topics like this, you never really know if it's true, but I
Oh, we
feel
know.
there is nothing more entertaining to talk about than a story like this. It's just fun to kind of entertain the idea and to think about it. Now, we're going to be going through Mike's story and his time traveling, which obviously
And-
we don't know if it's true, but I think it's interesting to take a look at. I don't fully not believe Mike's story.
Well, that's good. I'm glad you're not completely
No.
against
In
it.
fact, I'd love to believe it's true.
Well, the cool thing about Mike is he built his own time machine.
Mm-hmm. DIY'd it, baby.
And the really weird thing about it is that after he time traveled, he has not been seen or heard from since 2015 as far as like officially verified
Yeah.
accounts or encounters. There's
Mike,
been none.
Where are you?
There's
Come on
people
the
that
show.
claim they're Mike
We'll fly
online.
you out. I guess he doesn't even need to be flown out because he could just time travel here, right? Or I guess
You're talking about like teleporting now because
now I'm
like
getting confused.
I've got my theories. Time travel and teleportation.
you
might
think go
be-
I can
linked.
see where you're going with this. Yeah.
Mhm.
Especially when we get into the science of this, because we are science experts. After preparing for this episode, we know all the things.
We are physicists.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, the ladies here today are physicists, so all scientific
Why can't
questions
ladies
will
be
be.
physicists?
No, they can be, but
He's just putting it all on
Ah.
us.
Where's our white coats?
Yeah, we need white coats for sure.
I don't think physicists always wear white coats.
Well,
I think you're thinking
these
of a
ones
doctor.
do. No.
On the real though, I am very confused by the explanation of this. So
Can
bear
you
with
explain
me
to
at
the
least.
audience Einstein's theory of relativity?
Oh man, remember when my grandpa tried to explain it to us one night when we were in high school?
Yeah, and it was one of the best conversations I ever had with him
I was completely lost.
because I was like, "Your grandpa's a time traveler, man."
He honestly,
He
if anyone
is.
would be, it'd have been him. My
He
Jiddu.
is Mike.
Oh
Mhm.
my god,
He very well could be.
the plot thickens.
But before we get into our episode today, Josh and I and the whole team here have a very exciting announcement. And if you watch my show TCKR, you probably already heard, but we are launching a foundation. This is something that we have wanted to do for many moons, and we have finally done it. And that is thanks to all of you who have supported our content over the years. We are launching the Higher Hope Foundation, which seeks to provide advocacy efforts and financial assistance to victims and families of violent crime, as well as to other nonprofits who work in this space as well.
So you probably, if you're a fan of the show, you already know Higher Hope is a nod to our company and our podcast, Mile Higher.
Mm-hmm.
And hope is what we're hoping to provide in a way through the financial assistance that we're offering through these grants that can be applied for through our foundation, which is really, really exciting to really kind of organize our charitable efforts as a company and hopefully make a much larger impact on victims of crime and nonprofits that aid those in those situations. The goal with this foundation, though, is to be able to combine our efforts across all of our platforms, all of our shows, and really make a much larger impact as a whole through the foundation, which our motto is empowering change and igniting hope, which is what our goal is.
Yes, that's what this foundation really stands for. And we wholeheartedly believe that we can do that through this work. We have a lot of big plans and we are excited to see how it works out. We are just getting started. It's totally new to us. But the main reason that we've wanted to do this and wanted to do this for so long is obviously we've given back monetarily to a lot of families and to nonprofits over the years, and that's always been a great experience. But we would love to have been more involved in the process to be able to see exactly where those funds are going and get to see the change really happening for ourselves and be able to share it with you guys as well. So we're so excited about the Higher Hope Foundation, and we are actually going to be offering 2 different grants. We have the Hope Grant, which was created with victims and families in mind, and it specifically offers financial assistance for individuals experiencing hardship in the aftermath of a violent crime or the disappearance of a loved one. Through the Hope Grant, we will be providing accepted applicants financial assistance to help fund resources such as funeral expenses, legal fees, forensic testing, search party expenses, billboard promotions, private investigator fees, grief counseling, and more.
Then we also have the Empower Grant, which seeks to provide financial support for nonprofits who help victims of violent crime and missing persons that need additional funding in order to meet their goals or, accomplish the projects that they're working on. If you want to know more information about these specific grants or the foundation as a whole, you can head over to higherhope.org, and there's also links to apply for the grants that we just talked about. And yeah, we're super excited about what we're going to be able to do with this foundation. Again, really combining all the efforts. Our company, Mile Higher Media, contributed a large portion of funding in order to get the foundation off of the ground so that we can start making a difference from day one.
And we will continue to do so. So just even supporting our content helps support the foundation. And there's a couple other ways that you can support the foundation if you're interested. We are really excited that from now on, a percentage of all of our merch across any of the shows will be going back into the foundation. So you can support the foundation that way, or on our website, there's a tab called Get Involved where you can make a one-time donation. To any of you who do that, thank you in advance. It's really going to help us as we get started and to help as many people as we possibly can.
As Kendall was saying, we're super excited to see what kind of impact we can make with this foundation. And a huge thank you to all of you out there who've supported us over the years and our various shows. We couldn't have done it without you. We can't do it without you moving forward as well. So however you want to help or get involved, check out higherhope.org. All the information's there, but I'm sure we'll be talking about the work that we've been doing on the foundation periodically here on the podcast as well.
Definitely.
So it's
we'll
a great way
to
to
give you guys some updates on what we're doing, which is what I'm really, really excited to be able to do. And if you want to give us a follow on Instagram and Facebook, those will also be linked below. Would really help us as we are getting started. But yeah, excited to see where this goes.
Same. It's very exciting. But let's go ahead and dive into Mike Madman Marcum, the time traveler.
Hell yeah, baby.
Big thank you to ExpressVPN for sponsoring today's episode. Going online without ExpressVPN is like not having a phone case for your phone. Most of the time you'll probably be fine, but all it takes is one drop and you'll wish you had spent those few extra dollars on a case. If you're not familiar with VPNs, let me break it down very simple for you and why you need it. So every time you connect to an unencrypted network, out in cafes, coffee shops, hotels, airports, anywhere where there's a public Wi-Fi that is not secure, a hacker could easily be scanning that network for vulnerable devices and then proceeding to steal your personal information because they have tips and tricks in devices that allow them to capture the information going over that network and decode it and basically get your login passwords and username information, and you'll never even know it. There's also something called an evil twin attack, which is when a hacker sets up a dummy Wi-Fi network that resembles a public Wi-Fi network, and people connect to it because they see that it's open, not knowing that that is not the actual Wi-Fi network that they think they're connecting to, but in fact, a hacker is controlling that network. And before you know it, all your information is stolen. It's actually way easier than you'd think. Back in my IT days, I actually did a little bit of ethical hacking, and I know really how easy it is and how cheap it really is for a hacker to get started and capture that information. So to avoid all of this, this is where ExpressVPN comes in handy, because you can install it on your phone via the app, you can install it on your computer and a bunch of other devices. And basically, when you connect to the VPN, you're creating an encrypted tunnel for all your information to go through, and it basically makes it nearly impossible for a hacker to gain access to what you're doing through that connection. So why choose ExpressVPN? I think the number one reason to choose it is it's super easy to use. You just fire up the app and click one button to get protected. It works on all devices, and it's rated number one by top tech reviewers like CNET and The Verge. I've been using it for a number of years. I love it. It's a reliable service, and sometimes people worry that when I connect to a VPN, it's going to slow my connection down. It's always going to slow it down just a little bit, but I would say ExpressVPN is by far the fastest VPN provider out there. And it's great too for being able to access content on streaming platforms from other countries, because you can pick which server you're connecting to. So if you want to connect to Canada and see their Netflix library, you can use ExpressVPN to do so. It's really, really easy. Secure your online data today by visiting expressvpn.com/milehigher. That's EXPRESS VPN.com/milehigher. And you can get an extra 3 months free only at expressvpn.com/milehigher. Let's jump in to the story of Mike Madman Marcum, the time traveler. So unfortunately, when researching this guy, there's absolutely no background information available, including even his birthday.
It's not. Sorry, it's not available anywhere at all. And even those pictures that you come across, which seem to certainly be him, someone eventually on Reddit came and was like, "That's not me. That's some other random guy." So really, we don't know anything about him at all.
Yeah, this is very similar to the John Teeter
I was just about to say
situation.
that. Yep.
If you remember that time traveler story.
Remember when I called him John Titter?
Yes, I do.
I love the John Teeter story.
It is. It's a good one.
It is. It's just like, it's fun to go with the fantasy for a moment and just imagine.
If it is a fantasy.
That's true.
We don't know.
Can't necessarily be disproved, maybe. Necessarily.
But today we're talking about Mike. So in 1995, Mike Marcum, he was down on his luck. You know, he's like trying to figure out his life, what he's going to do. But he was working at a factory and studying electrical engineering in school. And unfortunately, we don't have a lot of information about what school or, you know, what kind of education he was doing. But he was studying electrical engineering. And I think, as you'll find, he does know some shit about electrical engineering.
Clearly he has
and about electronics.
Education in that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, this is pretty difficult concepts to wrap your head around without any education whatsoever on the subject. So he definitely did go to school and did some studying.
Or it was all, maybe he didn't go to school. He could have just done some, some internet
searches.
intensives.
True.
Or he had someone in his family that taught him the ways.
YouTube.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, he speaks about this on one of his various interviews. He was talking about, well, this was the day before the internet, so I couldn't really look anything up. So I just kind of figured it out on my own.
So maybe that's really the case.
So as far as we know, he may not have gone to school a day in his life. Possibly.
Again,
well, since we know nothing, then yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But as the story goes, he did work in a factory and he did study electrical engineering. But his friends and family had noticed that he wasn't going out a lot and spending most of his time at home, a real homebody, tinkering with electronics, just taking things apart, putting things together. Honestly, kind of cool. I went through a little tinkering phase in my life, not with computers.
Mm-hmm.
You remember that.
You were building gaming.
It's true. I wasn't building time machines, but I mean, some of my computers kind of looked like time machines. They're pretty sweet.
Mm-hmm.
But it's here that Mike possessed a real talent. He had taught himself how to wire transformers. He took apart numerous electronic devices to find their pieces and figure out, how they work together and create new items. He's really a talented home inventor, or at least a tinkerer, depending on how you want to look at it, as he didn't really invent anything of his own up until this point. So, tinkerer is probably the right term. In 1995, he wanted to try and make a Jacob's ladder with components he had lying around his house. And you've probably seen a Jacob's ladder before in the background of old movies, or a mad scientist is trying to invent something unfathomable, such as Frankenstein, iconic film. You remember that, right? You know the story of Frankenstein, right?
Oh, of course. Who doesn't know the story?
Put some electricity through him. So Jacob's ladder is basically a device that allows the human eye to see how electrical arcs travel. Two electrified wires conduct a single arc of electricity between one another. And since the arc is hotter than the air around it, it travels up the two wires until it reaches the top. And at this point, its connection is severed and it begins from the bottom again. So it's really a pretty simple device, but it's really cool. It'd be awesome to just have one here in the studio, I think. A low voltage one.
That would be
just
quite awesome.
But if you've ever seen one before, it's really cool because you're seeing like a little like lightning bolt go up these wires over and over again. Really cool.
Did you guys ever do that thing where you cut a grape in half and then put it on like a piece of wet paper towel and then microwaved it for a little bit? And you could see like a little spark of electricity go between the two halves of the grape?
Do we have any grapes here? I need to see this right now.
You could do that. It's cool. It's cool as shit.
I don't think we have grapes.
No, we have no grapes.
But you know what we do have? YouTube. Let's pull it up. I want to see this.
Okay.
If you don't know about grapes in the microwave, you haven't been keeping up with the internet.
All right, so we're going to do this grape in a microwave experiment.
For 20 years, people have been microwaving two grape halves connected.
There's a lot of juice.
Yeah.
How do you get like one depth between grapes? Amateur explanations focused on conducting electricity between the two halves. The skin bridge was the key. Or was it? Works. Light. Plasma.
There's a lot.
This looks unsafe. People, do not try this at home.
It's really awesome, though.
It is quite awesome. So you've done this, Ian?
Yes, I have. As a child.
As a child?
Whoa!
See, that's why you gotta have the skin bridge, and you gotta...
Skin bridge sounds
yeah.
like something else.
It's cool. It's cool. That's all I gotta say.
So no need to make a Jacob's ladder. Just head to your local grocery store,
is that
grab
what you
some
were
grapes
saying?
in a microwave.
That this looks like a Jacob's ladder, kind of.
It does. When it it makes plasma.
Okay.
Well, there's your fun science fact for the day. Thank you, Ian.
Proceed with caution.
We got
do not try this at home.
Bill Nye himself here today. So Mike could make the Jacob's ladder without issue. And the way that he would do it is he unwound two wire coat hangers, set them up in his kitchen, electrified them, and through that, he made the first part of his experiment. However, Mike wanted to see if there was a way to keep the arc of electricity moving up in the air without the wires to conduct it, sort of a floating energy field. So what he did is he took apart an old CD player to get the laser from within it. Mike thought if he could use a laser to heat the air above the Jacob's ladder, the air resistance would be less intense and the arc could continue to travel. However, this simple CD laser wasn't going to be enough to change the air temperature and provide the spark necessary for the arc to travel. If you're not familiar with a CD player, no, I'm just kidding. I mean, there might be people out there that never had one.
Actually, that's very valid.
Yeah, CD players went away a while ago.
Mm-hmm. It's been some
There's
time.
probably a lot of people
I think
listening that grew up with MP3 players.
What do you need to explain about it, though? I think people get it for the most part.
I don't know. There's a laser that reads the disc.
I actually
As it
didn't know that,
spins?
so thanks for telling me.
Well, at least kind of learn something. So Mark got to tinkering. He created a homemade transformer by winding wire around a conductor that would considerably increase the laser's voltage. Even though the amount of electricity wouldn't change since he was just plugging it into his home's outlet, which is likely capped out at the standard 120 volt outlet, which is what we all have at home if you're here in the US. And his homemade transformer would pressurize the flow of the electricity, allowing for nearly 10 times as much voltage to the CD laser. So think of this like a hose. If amps are the amount of water coming out of the hose, volts are the pressure at which it travels, which I think a lot of people don't know that. But by holding your finger on the opening, you can increase the pressure of the water without actually increasing the amount of water in the hose. So when Mike had finished building the transformer, he hooked it up to his now superpowered laser, pointed it at the Jacob's ladder, and then turned that puppy on. And while the laser didn't spark the electrical arc as planned, he noticed something strange in the air above the device. It looked almost like it was shimmering, like a mirage.
This is really fun
which
picture.
is pretty cool. Yeah. Or think of air above concrete on a hot day.
Oh, yeah. Like the mirage effect.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
But instead of shimmering upwards, it almost appeared spherical and three-dimensional. That's really cool. He described it as looking like a quote-unquote vortex.
That's sick.
So imagine you create this, how excited you'd be. You'd be like, holy shit, what is this vortex?
Mm-hmm.
You think you're onto something, right?
Definitely.
Mike was super perplexed by this anomaly he had just created. He had no idea what it was. He didn't know if it was just a field of electricity or maybe something more.
So you got to find out.
So he was like, well, let's throw something into it. So he got a spare sheet metal screw that was just lying around, and he tossed it into that energy field or this vortex, and he watched it vanish. For several seconds, the screw disappeared. Mike looked around Jacob's ladder in his kitchen, but he couldn't find any sign of this screw. But then suddenly it reappeared in the same spot he had thrown it from, and it clanked onto the ground. That would be a trippy moment. If this went down the way that he says it did, he must have been mind blown.
I definitely would be. It's fun to think about.
But unfortunately, before he could play with it some more and throw another screw into the vortex, the laser burnt up and the vortex disappeared with it. Even though he couldn't throw something else into the field, Mike Marcum felt he had just invented time travel in his kitchen. Because he's like, well, where'd the screw go? It disappeared, but then it reappeared the same place.
So where did the screw go?
Yeah.
Like was someone a few years prior just standing in their workshop or something, and a screw
Briefly, a screw
showed
popped.
up, and they're like, oh, I must have dropped this.
And then
Didn't
it
even know,
disappeared?
and it's gone.
Was it traveling through a wormhole?
What if it ended up somewhere bad where it shouldn't have been? Like a crib.
That's hopefully not. Jesus. Good thing it came back then if it went into a crib.
Yeah, that's true.
Terrifying. But yeah. So I can see how based off of this experiment, though, he was like, time travel's a real possibility here. And it's like teleportation as well. Because it's one place, then it's gone, then it's back. So he's like, let's build on this idea a little bit. Let's try this out again, but bigger and better.
So if Mike's assumptions were correct, then he had just built the world's first functioning time machine. But the vortex it created was only large enough to throw in small objects. And on top of that, you wouldn't know where they were going to go or when in time they would go. And there was really no, control over any of that. So that would present quite a problem, right? And Mike not only wanted to create something that could manipulate time, but he also wanted it to be large enough for him to fit inside because, of course, Mike wanted to travel. He planned to go forward in time, as most of us would probably do, and get some winning lottery tickets and then figure out a way to come back into, present reality and cash them in.
Which is pretty ambitious.
Yeah, that is. That's the ultimate plan,
because he has
right?
no evidence or data to back up that he's going to go just far enough in the future where he can get those lottery numbers and then come back and cash them out.
Yeah.
But I like where his head's at.
Yeah, I do too. It's giving evil genius.
Because he wants to win the lottery?
I mean, it'd technically be a scam. It'd be fraud.
Or would it?
I'm saying it's genius. I'm not hating on it. If he could pull it off. So Mike's back porch had these two large metal poles that he could use for the Jacob's ladder part of the experiment. But since his modified CD laser had burnt up, shucky darns, he needed an alternative, and his homemade transformer wouldn't be enough to cut it either. And he had noticed that the St. Joseph's Light and Power Generating Station in town had 6 industrial-grade transformers just lying around for years. No one was using them. And he felt like no one would miss them if he just put them to good use. So he enlisted the help of 2 other friends and their pickup truck to steal the transformers, which weighed about 230 pounds each, so quite a job. The 3 of them went down to the station in the middle of the day.
Yeah, the fact they go in the middle of the day, I'm like...
I know, that is impressive.
He must have really thought they didn't care about these transformers lying around.
Well, they were just sitting there. No one's using them.
But like, come on, if you're going to at least go steal it, why wouldn't you go in like the dead of night?
To be fair to Mike, in his interviews about it, again, if any of his words can be trusted, he did say there was not a single person at the power plant when he went.
Oh, I did hear him say that.
Mm-hmm.
Did he check for cameras, though?
That's
a lot
fair.
of these power
That's fair.
substations have cameras.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a little... Maybe he like accidentally gave that detail if this story is made up. But actually, no, it can't be made up because we do know that he stole the transformers, which we will explain. But yeah, they loaded up their trucks with the transformers and left without anyone seeing them. And then Mike created a more powerful laser by combining several that are found in various home electronics and rewiring them to allow for the stronger voltage. Then, when Mike had all of the pieces together, he plugged in the generator into his home power supply, flipped the switch, and nothing happened. There was so much nothing that Mike accidentally browned out most of the power in his small town. And if you didn't know, browned out means it's like short of a blackout. There's less area affected, but a lot of people lost power. Very bad. And to Mike, though, it wasn't very bad. Wasn't too bad for Mike. It was only a minor setback. He readjusted the voltage so he could still power his homemade laser, without disrupting the power through the town. He flipped the switch and created the same vortex, only this time it was the size of the 2 metal poles that were conducting it.
So several feet at this point, like big enough that a human could walk into it.
Exactly. But it wasn't without failure, unfortunately, because he had burned through 3 of the 6 stolen generators at this point. So that's a big problem, and all the objects that he had thrown into the vortex had completely disappeared. This included more screws, other household objects, large bugs, small animals, and even his couch.
Which I think the couch thing is like disputed on whether or not that actually happened.
What's disputed? Well, it's all disputed. This is Mike's story.
True.
But the misreported fact is that his cat was on the couch and time traveled with the couch, but that did not happen. Cat is fine.
But he did put a bunch of animals through it.
He did, like guinea pigs and shit.
Mice.
Squirrels.
Mm-hmm. According to Mike. So after a few weeks of playing with his unstable time machine, Mike thought he should just, go for it. Take a walk into the vortex for himself and just see what happens. However, this was interrupted because a BB gun had shattered a neighbor's glass front door, and they assumed that Mike's roommate was the one who shot it. And people have reported the following string of events differently. But according to Mike, police had arrived at his house with a search warrant for the BB gun and the power generators. Basically, since it was such a small town and these brownouts seemed to be coming out of nowhere, it didn't take long for police and the power company to realize it was probably the mad inventor who had spent all day just messing with electricity. But they didn't have probable cause to search the home until their neighbors had called about that BB gun. So the next part of the story is confirmed. Mike actually did spend 60 days in jail and was given another 5 years of probation for stealing those generators. So he did it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So it's like, why else would he have done that?
I don't know about you, but like, I want to know what his time in jail was like. Because imagine going into jail and, people are going to ask you, what are you in here for? And he's like,
stole the generators.
I'm trying to build a time machine. I stole power.
If I were in jail, I would love someone like Mike to be there to tell me about things like that. That'd
Yeah,
be much more
he'd
interesting.
be 60 days would go by pretty quick if you got to be bunkmates with Mike over here.
And maybe it was good for him. He could sit there and journal out thoughts and
design,
Yeah,
that's a good point.
Make some friends.
Yeah, exactly. Make some friends above all else.
So while Mike was serving time in jail, his story was picking up steam across the United States. All thanks to Art Bell, legend, who had hosted his popular talk radio show Coast to Coast since the 1980s. I'm sure many of you out there have heard Art Bell
Oh, yeah.
and his iconic shows. And I mean,
He's
huge
such a-
inspiration to Mile Higher and
Mhm.
some of the topics we've covered for sure. Gets into all
Fascinating show. Fascinating, man. Great episodes. Check it out if you haven't.
But Art Bell caught wind of this young man who was spending time in jail for time travel. Well, theft, really. Art Bell dispatched a producer to Missouri to find Mike only a few weeks after he got out of jail. Not only had Mike lost his house, obviously the landlord was like, oh, perfect opportunity to get him out of here. I don't want a mad scientist, creating a black hole or blowing up my house through these experiments. But he also lost his job, as his boss was worried that Mike was bringing dangerous PCB chemicals into the factory from taking apart so many electronics. And to be fair, Mike himself said that the stolen transformers hadn't been checked since the 1920s. So yeah, it seems like there's a really good chance there's going to be very hazardous chemicals in some of these electrical components that you wouldn't want, being melted down or just exposed, right? On top of all this, Mike had to leave his small town and decided to relocate to an apartment in Kansas City since everyone back home was pretty annoyed about the guy who had interrupted their power multiple times and was trying to build a time machine in his backyard. But while on Art Bell's show, Mike said that he would not stop trying to build this time machine. He was just going to do it the legal way this time. And I think it's important to hear a little bit of this conversation he had with Art Bell. So let's go ahead and play some of that.
You're back at this again, are you?
Yeah, I'm just picking up where I left off, but this time I'm not doing anything illegal.
No, when I we'll get to that. When I called you earlier today, you said, gee, it's well you caught me or something. I just got out of jail.
I got out of jail I got out of jail March 30th.
March 30th. Well, that's pretty much just out of jail.
Yeah.
And you're able to do this program tonight because you are more or less not employed.
Yeah, I got all kinds of free time right now.
Were you employed, Michael, at back when you got in trouble?
When I was arrested, yeah, I was.
So did this?
I was supposed to go to work the next day.
So in other words,
I got arrested.
So in other words, this cost you your job.
In a way, because there's other things branching off this, but my boss thought I contaminated his plant with PCBs, but that's another story.
So obviously starting this back up, Mike knew it was going to be expensive since he wanted to save up and actually purchase the transformers. And also he really didn't have a space large enough to test the machine that he was planning to build. I mean, can't really do this in an apartment, right? Probably not going to work. Just not enough room and too many people around. So Mike didn't really know where to go next. But thanks to appearing on Coast to Coast, callers reached out to Art while they were on air, and they offered to fund not only the equipment for the space, but also the space itself. In addition to receiving financial help, Mike got in contact with theoretical physicists who helped him come up with a new prototype. According to them, he was on the right track with the new prototype. What Mike had forgotten to account for was that time travel, at least as we understand it, is more than just a product of manipulating time around us. Because according to Einstein, the way we perceive time is a combination of distance and speed. And this has been observed with astronauts who have spent months in the International Space Station being hurled at thousands of miles per hour, because the faster you go, the slower time becomes. And astronauts have been shown to age less than people who spend their lives on Earth. Again, only by a few nanoseconds, but the change is observable. So while the time machine itself might be standing still, the Earth isn't. And we forget that the Earth is constantly moving in its rotation around the sun. So if Mike could manipulate light through the energy field he had accidentally created, it still couldn't account for the distance the Earth had traveled while the object was suspended in space-time. And this is why all of the objects, except for the original screw, disappeared after they entered the vortex. So Mike's new machine modified his Jacob's ladder, and instead of metal rods used before, he electrified 2 metal cylinders to conduct the energy field and keep it enclosed. He had constructed multiple rotating electromagnets underneath it to counteract the Earth's movement and gravitational pull. That way, the objects would not just disappear, but hopefully appear back within the time machine itself. And this kind of worked. Out of 200 tests, only one object was not recovered. However, they still weren't staying within the time machine. Mike would find them within the rented warehouse and realize that the more power he surged into the machine, the further away these objects would be. Mike called in Art Bell's show a second time a few months later and claimed that he was 30 days away from having his working time machine. And Art wanted to come down and visit, of course. Who wouldn't, right? But after a few years, he didn't hear anything. And eventually, when he went to the warehouse, it was completely empty. So was it even going on at all?
The world may never know.
Yeah, we don't know.
So then 18 years had passed, and Art still had heard nothing from Mike. Sure, he had other time travelers on his show. John Teeter, in fact, faxed in, claiming to be from the future before he disappeared after a few messages. Art even interviewed people involved in the alleged Philadelphia experiment, which we have also covered. Interesting episode. We'll have that linked below, where the same idea was applied to teleport/time travel U.S. ships during World War II to avoid German U-boats. However, as a reminder, in the Philadelphia experiment, men had become fused with the metal ship when it reappeared, and countless others were dropped overboard and drowned, completely unconfirmed. But what is true, though, is that the United States battleships were outfitted with electromagnets, so not to trip German underwater mines while crossing the Atlantic. But Mike's story was different because parts of it were verifiable. Like we said earlier, he really had stolen those 6 transformers. And what else would he be doing with them? He really had served time in jail, and what other homemade experiment would require that power level? Plus, Art knew from his listeners that Mike had used the money for something and was renting out the warehouse and had spoken to theoretical physicists. Art, who had called Mike Madman since their first interview, was afraid of the same possibility that Mike could electrocute himself to death due to extreme levels of power that he was using. And there were more fantastical fears too. One time, a caller called in and told Art that he had come across a newspaper article from the 1930s, which told a story of a man who was found in a strange metal tube that had washed up onto the beach. And the man had been folded many times and fused with the metal, just like what happened with the men in the Philadelphia experiment. So now Art wasn't just afraid that Mike was electrocuted, but maybe the experiment could have worked and he was killed in another time. But then in 2015, Art finally found Mr. Mike Marcum and had him back on his show, which is called Midnight in the Desert. Mike revealed to Art that he tried the time machine and it worked. But like his previous machine, Mike didn't know exactly where he would end up on the other side. Also, other issues with the design existed. Since Mike had designed the machine with the enclosed metal tubes, there would be no way to enter from the sides. And he had conducted all of the other tests by dropping objects from above the machine into its energy field. So if Mike wanted to access the machine, he would have to jump in it. But there was another problem. None of the objects that he had sent through had been as heavy as he was. The vortex had caught objects before they hit the hard warehouse ground, but what would stop him? And even though he had sent through other small animals before, and the largest, he says, was the size of a guinea pig, what was the possibility that the energy field wouldn't be enough and he would just be electrocuted within? So to counteract this, Mike decided to max out the power on the transformers, generating potentially millions of volts, and then he removed everything from his pockets, fearing that they would interfere. So Mike stands on top of a platform above the machine and just jumps inside. And when he came to, he was lying in a field in the middle of nowhere, had no idea where he was or when he was. He also said that he felt like he had been flashbanged, and the electromagnetic field had caused temporary amnesia. So for the first couple minutes, he couldn't even remember his own name. So we all know overall home-cooked meals are much better for you, better for your wallet, better for your health, good family time, cooking together. But let's be honest, it can be difficult, especially if you live a busy life, to make those home-cooked meals. You know, you got to think about what you're going to make a grocery list, go to the store, get everything you need. But that's why HelloFresh can change the game for you and get home-cooked meals back on your table without adding any more extra work and time. We actually skipped the last 2 weeks of HelloFresh, and I cannot tell you how much we miss it. We were just discussing it last night. It is such a game changer. We skipped it because we had a bunch of family events and we were going to be out of town, so we didn't need it, but now we definitely do.
It's so much easier to have your meal already there waiting for you, and then you just put put the ingredients together, and it takes half the time at least to get a HelloFresh meal on the table, as opposed to a meal that you plan out.
Yeah, especially when we'll have all the ingredients for something and then we realize we don't have one thing.
Oh,
We're
yeah,
like,
that's the worst. Then you have to like try to make it work somehow.
We truly love HelloFresh in our house. We've been HelloFresh subscribers at least 2-3 years
Probably
now,
more than
consistently.
that, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, we've been using it for years, but I'm saying like
Well,
on
like,
a weekly
yeah.
basis. With HelloFresh, there's no more endless recipe searching or spending money on a whole jar of spices only to use a pinch of them. With HelloFresh, everything you need to make that delicious meal comes right to your door, pre-portioned and fresh, so you can cut back on the food waste and enjoy a delicious meal. There's always new flavors to explore with an ever-changing menu of 50 recipes to choose from every week. You just pick your meals and your delivery date. It's that simple. And like I said, plans change and life gets busy. That's why HelloFresh lets you easily customize your delivery from week to week. You can skip it if you need to. You can adjust your delivery date, or you can add more servings if you have people in town. It's really such a custom experience. I really can't say enough good things about HelloFresh, and it's not just how convenient it is, but it's also just delicious. We love our HelloFresh meals, and narrowing down what we're going to have for the week is always a challenge because there's just so many great options. So you got to get started with HelloFresh, friends. And for free breakfast for life, go to HelloFresh.com/free-mile-higher. Free breakfast for life just by going to HelloFresh.com/free-mile-higher. HelloFresh, America's #1 meal kit. But Mike spotted a county road in the distance and began walking. He had no money, no identification, no idea where he was. Eventually, he reached town and found a homeless shelter and figured out where he was at that point. And once he was there and got, his feet on the ground a little bit more, he did regain his memory and looked at a newspaper. Not only was he 800 miles east of the warehouse, he had also gone 2 years into the future. And he claims that he worked odd jobs until he could afford a place to stay, also new clothes, food, and eventually a Greyhound bus destined for Missouri. And I definitely have some questions about the odd jobs. I mean, he said he did things like wash dishes and stuff, but
Why do you question that? That's like the
I just don't
most basic odd job you can
just
do.
wouldn't you explain? I just feel like there'd be more to this story. Like where were you washing the dishes? At this restaurant called blank, or
Right.
So you're criticizing him for not providing more details.
I'm just
around
like,
his
if you're
story.
really trying to sell your story, like provide some details. I
What
want
do
to
you
hear more of the
want?
story.
I
Just not
washed
like I
dishes
did
at-
some odd jobs and
Yes, I washed dishes at Carrabba's.
You want his resume?
yeah, I want to know. Was it Carrabba's? Was it Subway? Like, where'd you do this?
I will say, again, the one thing from this point, he talks about how he left his wallet back in the warehouse because he emptied his pockets. He didn't want...
He didn't think to take his wallet with him?
Well, because he didn't want it to potentially get fused with him. He was worried that... But he also was wearing clothes.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, you would think you'd jump in naked.
Yeah, I mean, frankly, I don't know.
That'd probably be the smartest thing.
That would
to
be
do.
the smartest thing. But he took his wallet out, which is why he didn't have a social security card with him. So, and he couldn't remember his social security number. So he claims he went to the social security office to get a new social security number, which is not, you can't do that.
Was he asking for a new social security card or a new number?
Number, and you can't
remember
do
his
that yet
number.
unless you have like...
Yeah.
It's
mm-mm.
hard.
We know that from the Burger King story.
Yeah.
What was his name? We covered that a couple
BK
months
Doe.
ago. BK Doe, yes. Couldn't get a social security
He
card.
has
He
an
was like
actual
totally
name, but-
screwed by it.
Benjamin Kyle.
Yeah,
yes.
Benjamin Kyle.
But that's not even his
I
real
love
name.
that
either.
man. I love that story. One of my favorites we've covered. But yeah, he was like completely screwed by that. You aren't just walking in there and be like, hey, can I get a number? So
True.
yeah, it's things like that.
Yeah, how come he doesn't have a story about going to the Social Security office?
Well, he does. He just says that he went and they gave him a new number, and that's it.
But that's what I'm saying. Like extrapolate. And I
Right.
talked to this woman that looked like this, or I don't know, like give us some detail, Mike. I can't just believe this. It's so plain.
Well, and again, if he had gone in time, forward in time for 2 years, we talk about this a little bit, but if he had gone forward in time 2 years, then he would have been missing for 2 years, and there were no missing persons reports.
Yeah, that's true.
or-
It's a big
Oh,
point.
that
Mike
is a
Marcum.
good point.
Now, we kind of talk about ways in which that might not have happened theoretically,
Mhm.
but just based
Yeah, later on.
there was absolutely no missing persons report from Mike Marcum.
But anyway, back to the story. Mike hops on a Greyhound bus headed for Missouri. And when he got back to the warehouse, the landlord had cleared the space of everything, which would really suck because that included millions of dollars worth of equipment, all of his footage, all of his notes, everything was gone. So he decided to go off grid for a while, which is probably a wise choice. Even wiser choice, he moves to Hawaii. Who wouldn't want to go there? And there he worked with more electrical engineering and eventually got back in contact with Art Bell. At the end of their new interview, Mike said that he wanted to try again, and Art suggested that he start a GoFundMe and that he would be welcome back on the show anytime. Now, unfortunately, Art Bell did pass away later that year, and a now deleted Reddit post from 2022 claiming to be Mike Marcum said that he was still working on the time machine, so maybe he is. We do know that Mike Marcum is still alive and prefers to be out of the spotlight.
Do we know that he's still alive, though?
Yeah, I was going to say that too. Like, how do we really know?
Again, the only way we know he's alive is just from the Y-Files video where he says, we were able to find him, but I don't want to dox him. So,
oh, yeah, Y-Files got in contact with him.
Or they found
someone. No, they never talked to him because he accused them of lifting some copyrighted content from them.
Oh, really? There's
But that could have also been...
but that could be an imposter as well. We don't know.
Oh, yeah.
Because again, yeah, I'd be curious to see what the Y-File dug up and how they verify.
How do they know? How can anyone verify that it's him?
I prefer to think that he really disappeared.
Okay.
And he just hasn't showed back up yet. Or I have some other theories.
Alternatively, though, we do, the Mike that Y-Files talked to says that he prefers to be out of the spotlight. Also, shout out to Y-Files. I really like them. But anyway, if he had rebuilt his machine, the only people who would know would be, those in the past or the future. So how do we confirm?
Exactly my point. Because it's not like he's done a video interview with anybody.
No.
There's no public, proof of life evidence out there.
But
there's online communication via Reddit, Facebook, but
yeah.
And I looked at those and I'm like, yeah, it's like it's easy to fake somebody on both of those. Mm-hmm. Have you ever heard of catfish?
Yeah, that's true.
It's easy to catfish people.
That is true. Yeah, I don't know. But in his defense, to play devil's advocate, would you really want to be very out in the public?
Well, it never seemed like he was really that kind of guy.
Yeah.
That was looking for fame or money or something like that.
Well, I think he was looking for money.
Well, money to fund the work.
Oh, that was what the lottery was for, to fund the work? Or did he just want to...
Well, maybe that was just something funny he said, because would anybody want to get the lottery with numbers?
I will say that is one of the two constant male fantasies is winning the lottery and stopping a violent hostage situation. Those are the two male fantasies.
That's fair.
Josh, is that true?
No. Not mine.
You don't want to win the lottery?
No.
Okay.
Because you want to talk about crazy stories. Lottery winners, dude. Most of them lose it all.
No, it's true. It is true.
Yeah, it's really bad.
There's some really sad stories from that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of crime surrounding lottery winners.
Hey, maybe we should do an episode on
chances.
That.
I'll take my chance. Money does not fix all problems, and money
I didn't say that.
Can't buy happiness.
That is true.
I truly believe that.
And it's the root of all evil?
Amen.
But the question of the day, people, do we believe Mike's story?
Let's talk about the inconsistencies in the experiments, because there's definitely some things to note here. So in Mike's first experiment, the laser that he uses, we're talking about a CD player laser. This thing would have burnt out immediately if it worked at all, right? I mean, the lasers are... probably shouldn't take a CD player and put it up to your eyeball and look into the laser.
Please don't do that.
That'd probably be bad. Looking at any laser would be harmful. But you know what I mean? The lasers on those things probably could cost 2 cents. They don't generate a whole lot of electricity or heat.
Yeah.
So it's
can you really make
that is a
time machine out of a Walkman?
Exactly. And where are you getting these other lasers from? From household electronics. I'm trying to even think of other electronics that even have a laser at all. Can you think of any?
No, I also don't
Google
care
that. Like
enough
what
to look
household
into
appliance, like what household items even have a laser?
I'm going to look up.
Because I'm
Can
curious.
you still buy a CD player?
Like maybe a DVD player, or I'm like, what uses a laser to read things?
Oh, wow.
Right.
You can still buy CD players, guys, on Amazon.
I'm curious.
They're cool looking now. I kind of want one.
What has a laser? No, laser cutting is not what we want.
No, I know. This is a very odd question. I think Google's confused.
Right, because there's nothing that you have at your house as a laser.
Ask ChatGPT.
Janelle doesn't know.
I can never say
Janelle
that.
hasn't talked to ChatGPT yet.
Yes, I have.
Yes, she has. Everyone has.
Your COVID thermometer?
Blu-ray, DVD players, printers. Oh, yeah, printers do. Barcode scanners,
yeah.
laser pointers. Duh. Jesus. Oh,
Like the little ones for
leveling
cats?
tools.
Oh.
Like,
Okay.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Some measuring tools.
fiber optic cables.
So plenty of options. We can go home and build one of these ourselves.
I have a printer. I have a leveling tool. Oh, optical mice. Right. I remember optical mice. We still use them today.
I was gonna
What's
say,
optical
isn't
mice?
that what we use now?
What is that?
Like a computer mouse, right?
She has never
Oh.
used one before,
How-
but it's
you never used one with the
you
ball?
control
No, I am anti-mouse.
your computer.
I'm a
With,
trackpad person.
No, but like, remember when we would play like?
that's
yeah, of
not
course,
an
when we were kids.
That's not an optical
Then
mouse.
what is it?
That's just a regular mouse. Optical mice replaced the traditional
Yeah,
ball.
I know. That's what
Yeah.
I'm saying. Remember the old? That's what's replaced now. Versus like we don't have the little balls anymore. But do you remember that when we were playing?
Yeah.
As kids.
Of course.
Yeah, and you had to have like a mouse pad for it to even
Yep.
hope to work. And then that's what was nice about the optical mice is that
Yeah.
you could put it on a bunch of different surfaces and it'd still read.
Yes.
Anyway.
So yeah. So I walk back what I said. There's definitely enough items to combine them to make a powerful laser, perhaps.
But would you be able to rewire them to make them more powerful, or would
Yeah.
they all just burn out at once?
True. And are any of them really that powerful? Because I think there's like, you can buy like pretty high powered lasers. They're expensive. And sometimes there's hoops you got to jump through. Because obviously, like, the FAA doesn't want you outside with the laser, like shining in at planes and stuff. Let's talk about the voltage from his house. Because I think the big question is like power, right? Did he really have the capability to generate the type of power you would need? You know, we're talking like 20,000 volts. Like serious power. Just at, in your backyard or on your
with
porch.
6 transformers.
That's crazy, right? Like
That is.
there's no reports of the fire department showing up like with that much like electricity and light being emitted from this machine. I mean, it's pretty crazy. So while they would have increased the voltage from his house, he would need more power than he could generate to brown out most of his town, right? You need a ton. He would then have to connect it to a proper power generator rather than a transformer, no matter how intense of one it was. This also applies to the warehouse experiments. To generate that kind of voltage, even with the most advanced transformers possible, he would need to be hooked up directly to the power plant, which he was clearly not. Since his initial experiment was done with all household objects, why hasn't anyone been able to replicate it? That's another good point, especially when you can purchase more high-quality items today than a salvaged laser from a CD player back in 95. It is a little convenient that his landlord removed millions of dollars of equipment as well. So he goes back, it's 2 years, not that long. I mean, enough for somebody to like want to remove stuff and lease it out to somebody else. But, millions of dollars of equipment's just gone. Where'd that go?
Mm-hmm.
And what about the multiple electromagnets that Mike supposedly built on his own in a matter of months? And what about Mike? As we mentioned earlier, wouldn't he have been reported missing if 2 years went by and nobody had seen you?
Well, sometimes people do disappear and then no one knows. Sadly, like they don't have anyone in their lives or no one cared enough to file a report. We've seen cases of that. So again, the BK Doe, to bring that up. But he was actually named William Burgess Powell, and no one in his family reported him missing. They didn't realize that he was gone. So maybe it was a situation like that.
Seemed like people knew that what he was doing. I mean, he literally went to jail. You know what I mean?
No, I'm with you.
I'm
just playing the other side.
There was reporters.
I want to believe this story.
True. But theoretical physics also could possibly explain this paradox we've just been talking about of why he may not have been reported missing for the 2 years that he time traveled. So, you know the saying from time travel stories, don't change the past, it'll ruin the present. But this can be explained a few different ways. For one, we have to take a look at the old Back to the Future conundrum. If Marty weren't successful in getting his parents together, he wouldn't have been born. But if he weren't born, then he wouldn't have been sent to the past and accidentally seduced his mom. So Marty's presence in the past was the instrumental moment that got them together in the first place. But this still wouldn't explain why the people who knew Mike wouldn't have looked for him when he went missing. If we're to believe the multiverse theory, time travel doesn't just allow you to travel through time in this universe, but you travel to other timelines in other universes. So in Mike's original timeline, the experiment might have failed and he would have died or just stopped tinkering with it. But when he arrived at the other timeline 2 years later, he might have constructed it in another warehouse and jumped in when our Mike came to the future. So basically he jumped timelines is the
Right.
Yeah.
to sum this up. And that's why his facility wasn't there, because it's perhaps in a different warehouse.
Yeah.
And he would have had to have jumped in based on the Back to the Future thing. He would have had to have jumped in this new timeline at the same moment he reappeared. So therefore, there wouldn't be any time he was actually missing.
Yes.
Mind blown.
It's cool ass
It
shit,
is,
right?
it is.
Yeah, it is cool. And it makes me want to watch Back to the Future. I think we need to have a marathon. Watch them all again. It's been a couple years since we've seen that.
It's a great, great film. So especially when most theoretical physicists agree that time travel is possible, but it doesn't hinge on energy or materials. It rests on light speed. So in order to understand this idea of time traveling further and from somebody far smarter than we are, I want to play this short clip from Neil deGrasse Tyson talking about, is it possible to time travel in the future? And is it possible to time travel into the past? And why one or the other may or may not be possible? Because I think it's interesting the way he explains it.
And can explain it
Yeah.
much better than us.
Probably so confused, but hopefully he clears it up.
Einstein's special theory of relativity lays out the whole recipe of how you can move into the future. And all you have to do is go into sort of a lower gravity field relative to other people, or just travel very fast. And your clock will tick slower than that of everybody else that you've left behind. And then when you return, you'll be younger than your twin, for example, if you had left your twin back on Earth. So in that sense, you are traveling into the future. That's easy to do, and we've known how to do that. Traveling backwards, that's the problem. We think we can do that. I have some colleagues who've made some calculations that assert that depending on a trajectory you take around a black hole, you can come out and end up in the past of when you started. But that takes extraordinary setup to make happen. But right now, no problem traveling into the future.
So there you have it. You heard it from Neil deGrasse Tyson. We do have the ability to time travel into the future. It's not necessarily in the way that you would think about it, right? And then the way that he describes it, it's very much along the lines of the plot line in Interstellar, right?
I was like, how long till Josh brings up Interstellar?
Well, that's a great depiction of like
It really is,
what
though.
time travel could look like in the future as humans if we ever get to the ability to traverse the universe. I mean, we'll technically be time traveling because we'll either be traveling at light speed or we'll be traveling in a different relative gravity.
Yeah.
Whether the gravitational force is higher or lower than here on Earth, time will move fast or move slower or faster depending on what that is. So time travel in that way. But like, how do you like take all of that and then like build that into a machine? You know what I mean? And we're talking about black holes, especially when talking about potentially time traveling into the past. But it was interesting because he's like, it wouldn't be time traveling in the past as we think of it or in Hollywood, where it'd be like you go back,
Yeah.
like
Back to the
hundreds of years,
Future
but
style.
rather you'd go back to the point at which you entered, which is interesting. So
Yeah.
Let's see, and this is where I would like to bring up the book Austin and I are reading.
Oh, yeah. You guys have been into this book.
Yes, Book of the New Sun by Gene Wolfe. Also, shout out Austin, Lights Out Podcast, if you guys haven't heard of it.
he's been on Mile Higher before, actually.
Oh, yeah.
so
He did do an episode on
people
here.
know him.
I love you, Austin. But there's two characters in the book where the book takes place millions of years in the future, so far into the future that society has regressed to the medieval age.
Oh, yeah. You guys were telling me about this the other morning. What's it called again?
The Book of the New Sun. The first one is called
Book
The
of the New
Shadow
Sun.
of the Torturer.
Ooh.
It's badass. Mr. Gene Wolfe was an electrical engineer, in fact, in his lifetime. So he was
wow.
a very intelligent man. He designed the machine that makes Pringles.
Wow.
Yeah. And
Thank God for him.
He looks a lot like Mr. Pringle.
He's a hero.
Does he? He looks like the Pringles character?
Yes, he does. Yes,
oh, so they modeled it after him?
There are theories.
Wow,
Fun
he
fact.
really does.
He really
Wait,
He's
I
got
need to see
the
it.
whole
Bring him up.
handlebar stash.
What's his name?
Gene Wolfe with an E at the end.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, Slay King.
But he
Pringles.
was really handsome when he was young. That's what I found out yesterday.
Oh.
I think he's still handsome there, man.
I mean, look, that's a stud.
Yeah, that is.
He's no longer with us, though. He
No.
died in 2019.
Oh, rest in peace.
But the time travel plays a very important role throughout the entirety of the Book of the New Sun. And one of the most interesting parts are, so again, it's millions of years in the future to the point where society, as the main characters know it, is basically in the medieval age. But there are these two characters in the book who are very mysterious, and they seem to know a whole lot about the past. And as you come to find out, they actually were on a spaceship from, only a couple thousand years into the future from where we are now. And they had been in space so long and traveled so long that when they tried to return back to Earth, it was in this medieval age and there were no spaceports left for them. So they had to crash land.
Oh, wow. That is interesting.
It's really cool.
That is really cool.
And there's also a time machine in it because elevation also affects the way in which time you perceive time. So there's a time machine in it where the top of it is the time traveler's present, which is thousands of years in the future to the main characters. But as he travels down this massive tower, he's in the character's present.
Whoa. Oh, that's super interesting.
So, just read Book of the New Sun.
I feel like I might need to get that on Audible or something. That's really interesting. They should make a movie out of that.
It would be really hard because there's a lot of crazy shit. They also eat people to consume their memories and
they could leave that part out.
They could.
That's cool though.
It's really cool.
So that's what we got to look forward to as human beings. We're going to regress into the medieval age. We're not moving forward. We're going to go backwards in time. It does feel like that sometimes, though.
That's what I was going to bring up, too. Would you guys want to time travel if you had the option? I know you're going to say yes, for sure.
I would say, yeah, why not?
You said, yeah? Really?
Yeah, sure.
I don't like the idea of it, really.
Huh.
I don't know.
I'm
she doesn't want anything to change ever.
Yes,
Exactly right.
I have no
changes.
Not surprised at all.
Okay, here's another question. Would you rather go into the past or the future?
If the past were possible, I would go back in the past if only I could return to my current timeline. If I had the option to do so.
So if it was like a day pass.
Yes. If I had a choice of, well, you can go back into the past at any time period, but you'll have to stay there and live out the rest of your days. I don't know that there's a time period I want to live out the rest of my days in that would be better for me personally than the current or the future.
Yeah.
So I would lean towards the future because in my mind, I hope in the future that, for me, it'd be meeting face to face with an extraterrestrial. So some other intelligent being from another planet, star system, galaxy, that would be the ultimate dream.
So you'd rather go to the future?
Yes.
But what if there are no extraterrestrials in the future and it just is a dystopian post-apocalyptic nightmare?
Well, that would suck too, and I would ask to be returned.
Okay, so then the question changes, and I'm going to ask you guys too. You can't go back. You either go to the past, you go to the future, you take your chances, you ain't coming back. Permanent.
Well, I think one could say there's far more risk involved with going to the future than there is to the past. Because at least with the past, you kind of have an idea of what you're walking into.
Yeah.
Unless it's like in the middle of like the Ice Age or something, then we don't have a whole lot of info on what life was like. I guess.
And why would you want to go back there?
No.
You could pick where you go.
Okay, so you can pick?
Yeah. You can pick exactly what you go to, past or future.
I'd still go to the past.
Really?
Yeah.
1960s, baby.
Sweet.
That would be cool.
Yeah, I'd go to the past.
Yeah, I think I've told you guys this before. If I could time travel to anywhere, June 6th, 1944, storm the beaches of Normandy with those brave men.
Wow, Ian.
That's a noble answer.
So brave of you.
Yeah, I'd first wave, die immediately. Or I'd go to the future to figure out how I die and then take the place of that Ian. So everyone's just kind of confused.
I was going to say, if I could go anywhere in the past, I would go as far back as I possibly can. I'd dial that thing back to day one of the
Why?
universe.
There's no Uber Eats.
Yeah. You will not survive.
No, and that's fine. If I could go back and I could just be conscious even for a split second and see how this all started, that would be fine for me. I'd be happy.
But you have
just
to stay there.
Well, I'd probably be dead because depending on the way the universe started,
last very long.
I'd be blown into smithereens.
So that's really what you want.
I do. I would want to know if I had one chance to do this, I'd want to know the answers
Now,
to why we're here, what created us.
this is interesting. This brings up an episode of Family Guy in which Stewie goes back to the point
Oh
of
yeah,
creation,
yeah.
and he accidentally causes the Big Bang.
Oh,
So with this, again, could play into that paradox where if you decide to go back to the point of creation to meet God or see what was there, you going there might actually be the thing that creates the entire universe.
That's kind of a sleigh.
What about you, Kendall?
I mean, really, I'd like to stay just right
Nope.
here.
No, you don't.
But if I had to pick one, yes, I would. I don't want to go back in time and not have
Pick.
I don't know. Actually, though, at the same time, it would be nice to be before social media. I feel like times were better back then. Yeah, like maybe the 60s to the 80s, somewhere in there. And I would go to the past before I go to the future. I'm not taking a chance on what could possibly happen.
I agree.
I don't think we're going in a great trajectory, but I guess every generation.
Yeah, what if
does
you go in the future and we're all enslaved by AI?
Yeah, I could see that happening. I'm good.
We're now the inferior species on this planet.
Okay, so what if you could time travel to a year of your own life? Would you want to go back? Would you want to go to the future?
No, baby. Summer 2016. Let's go.
Oh, the year we got married. Is that why? You want to be at our wedding again?
No, that was not what I was thinking. It was just really fun.
Yeah, you were living it up in college still.
I just remember I liked 2016 a lot.
Mm-hmm. That was a good year.
Things were great.
That was a great year.
I had a nice time. I would go there.
Would you go back with the intention to change anything in your life?
No, I just want to relive summer of 2016.
Do
Okay.
everything the exact same.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Ian?
I would probably go back to the winter of 2016. 2016 was a good year.
So good.
Mm.
That's when I started college, and also then I could attend your guys' wedding. I didn't know you then.
Yeah. We would love to have you.
I'd
there.
show up, be like, hey, you're gonna hire me in like a decade. So, and no, I wouldn't change a thing. I would tell my emaciated self, like, don't change a thing. But you're gonna be depressed for a while.
Oh my God. I live with that too, where I really don't have anything I regret to where I'd want to go back and change the past.
Well, that's like brings up the whole grandfather paradox with time travel, where if you go into the past, you can't exactly change anything. Like you can't change anything drastic, such as killing.
Butterfly
like
effect.
in this grandfather paradox, if you went back and like killed your grandfather, then therefore your father or your mother, father, or whatever, wouldn't be born. So you can't exactly manipulate it in that way because that creates a contradiction. So, but you could just go back and just relive it.
I'd love to just go back and go talk to my grandparents. That'd be really cool. If I could really do one thing, go back in time, be able to speak to them again, appreciate them more.
I would like to be able to speak to them, but in the mindset of now, because when I was a kid, I was this little brat who didn't care.
But it's you now.
Like many kids. But yeah.
30-year-old Janelle gets to go back.
Yes. That'd be sweet.
I know. That's the main one for me.
I would also go back and adopt Charlie way earlier to get him out of the crappiness.
Oh, yeah. You could have
think about
saved
that often.
him from the puppy mill much sooner. But at least you have him now.
Yeah.
Anyway, one thing that's really interesting to think about is we actually witness time travel every night. When you look up into the stars, you guys, since time is a combination of distance and speed, the stars that you look at now, they actually appeared millions of years ago, since their light only reaches us at light speed, which is 186,000 miles per second. And in this way, we are essentially looking into the past, which is always a fun thought. I love thinking about that when I gaze at the stars.
Thinking how I want to just stay right here and not go anywhere, not have anything change.
Exactly.
Love it.
That's comforting.
I look into the stars and I'm like, I need to build a spacecraft.
Josh, we know.
Literally, I'm like, I think no film has hit me like Interstellar did. Like,
really?
I felt my soul's calling from that movie of like,
I know.
Although I would take my family with me rather than leaving you on Earth. I'd be like, come on this journey with me.
Kendall, you would not go.
No, I ain't going.
No.
Well, I'd take my daughter with me and together.
You ain't taking my daughter.
And we'll see you when you're old and gray.
Oh my God.
When we return.
Like you and Murph. Should have named our daughter Murph.
That's honestly kind of what I'm thinking for the next one.
Really?
Murph.
As a matter of fact.
Murph.
Yeah,
they're not pregnant.
Don't leave me, Murph.
Thank you, Janelle. People are going to automatically assume. But anyway, we live in 3 dimensions: height, width, and depth. But say we're 2-dimensional beings living on a piece of paper. If a 3-dimensional object like a thumbtack pierced the paper, we would not be able to perceive the tack, but would rather be able to see the hole that it has created in our universe, which sounds pretty complicated, but it's a fun little experiment to do. Grab yourself a piece of paper, ladies and gentlemen, and a tack. But because we are 3-dimensional beings, we cannot interact with the 4th dimension, which is time, in any other way than we can perceive it around us. And the speed at which we perceive time is dictated by light speed. So if we could surpass light speed, we could finally perceive a 4th dimension. However, of course, we can't even possibly reach light speed, at least as of yet, which is unfortunate.
But I'm working on it, and I'll show you my calculations at home.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So leave it to Ian. It's going to happen. Yeah. But what if we could slow it down? That's what theoretical physicist and professor Ronald Mallett is currently figuring out. Ronald has been interested in time travel since he was a little boy, and his father died when he was only 33, and he actually wants to go back in time and tell his dad to stop smoking. Ron has found a way to slow down individual photons by reflecting them as often as possible. And if you think about it like a light clock, if you could isolate a single photon in an enclosed space, it would bounce back and forth while it was ticking. But if you moved it with the clock, especially at high speeds, the photon would need to cover more ground before bouncing back, slowing down its rate of travel. And again, going back to the astronauts, this is why they age slower while moving at sustained speeds for long periods of time. So Ron has created a mirrored and enclosed space and shined lasers into it to show how with each reflection, each bounce, essentially, the photon slows down and therefore our perception of time without increasing speed. So this is a way we observe how we can manipulate time, but how can we use it to travel through it? At this point, Ronald's invention would have to be the size of the universe. So
long ways to go.
Yeah.
Before if we ever have the technology to be able to create this.
So do we believe Mike? Do we believe what percentage of
I believe it
believes? Really?
99.9% sure this is legit, man.
See, I don't believe
he's not here. I don't think he's out there. I think he went to a different timeline.
Now, here's the thing. What if because when he came back onto Art Bell's show in 2015, he was like, no, that was not me in the 30s who got crumpled like a piece of paper. But what if that just hadn't happened yet? What if he traveled back now and he's now all folded up?
Oh, shit.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. There's always a chance.
Now, I don't really believe Mr. Mike Marcum.
Yeah, same, unfortunately.
But Ronald Mallett, again, just to go back to Book of the New Sun real quick, there's this invention created by Father Iniri, which, Austin, don't listen to this part because it's a spoiler. He is an alien who gives them a bunch of technology, and he has this invention, which is essentially exactly what Ronald Mallett has figured out. It's a perfectly mirrored space that reflects so much to the point where it actually teleports items and environments from other timelines.
Environments?
Yes. So there's this whole botanic gardens where quite literally like whole regions are reflected to go back into time or to different places on Earth because it's just so perfectly reflected.
Interesting.
So read
like a great book.
Yeah, read Book of the New Sun, everybody. But I think Ronald Mallett is onto something. He just needs to. But again, It goes back to that initial problem, though, that we were talking about. That really, even then, if you were to slow down every photon in the universe, you really could only travel back to the point in which you enclose them all within that space.
Yes.
I think you would need something much more powerful, such as a wormhole, entering a black hole, something with, a gravitational force far greater than anything we could possibly create here on Earth.
But do you really know more than Ronald Mallet?
No, maybe he's onto something.
Maybe he is. We should have him on the show. That'd be interesting. I'd love to hear more about this.
I do think with Mike's story, though, like if he really did do everything he said he did, that the U.S. government would be all over this.
So maybe they were. And maybe that's why we haven't heard from him, because he's locked up somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. The U.S. government maybe seized this technology and seized him as well.
Yeah. They Nikola Tesla'd him.
Yeah, exactly. It's very possible. It's happened before. So what do you think?
I don't know what to think. I mean, I'd say I 95% do not believe his story, unfortunately. But there's a percentage of me that kind of does. It's fun to think about. It's entertaining for my brain.
Yeah, at the very least, it's an entertaining story.
Yeah. And at the very, very least, he's a creative man.
Yeah, I mean,
just the story in itself is interesting. Could have added more details, though. He really could have.
I feel like inventing is so important, though. We need innovative people who are trying to push the boundaries of science and technology. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And, to a certain degree.
That stay in that realm, but then don't try to go and enter the politosphere
or do something dangerous with it. But yeah.
Exactly. But yeah, very interesting story. Definitely let us know what you think of Mike Madman Marcum. Do you believe that he created a time machine? What other time travelers have you heard of that we should cover in a future episode?
What was he doing with the generators, though, if he wasn't doing this? I believe he was really trying. We know that he did that. So I think whether or not the whole story of it playing out.
Like, was he just tinkering around this entire time
he was
and nothing
trying,
ever happened, really?
Maybe had some creative stories when it didn't work.
Or maybe he was like really trying to just get a good job, right?
Yeah.
Try to kind of like make some noise, and Art Bell kind of blew him up and people started contacting him, or maybe DARPA. Remember DARPA?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they reached out to him and that's who he works for. He's in like protected custody with the United States government working on top secret technology.
Could be.
At Cheyenne Mountain, and he lives there and he's working on high tech stuff. You never know.
Yeah, they took him to use him as a
tool.
I
mean, the U.S. government seized all of Nikola Tesla's stuff.
Yeah.
The Wardenclyffe Tower. Remember that?
Maybe that's why he got back and all his shit was gone out of the warehouse. Interesting to think about. Don't really believe it, but I want to hear from you guys. Do you believe Mike Marcum's story? Do you want to believe Mike Marcum's story is the real question, though.
And would you time travel?
Yeah, I want to hear that too. To the past or the future, and why?
But that's going to be it for us today. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Mile Higher Podcast. If you enjoyed it, we'd love for you to leave us a comment, hit that subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube, or hit that follow button on Spotify if you're enjoying the show over there. We'd really appreciate it. But we will catch you guys next time. And until then,
keep on taking your mind a mile higher.